Yeah, Monday morning. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Shelby County Board of Education's March 20th work session. Ms. Anthony, please call the roll.
Board Member Caldwell,
Here.
Board Member Orgel, Board Member Woods, Board Member Love, Board Member McCormick, Board Member Jones, Board Member Bibbs, Board Member Cornell, Board Chair Avant,
Here.
Board Member Orgel, Board Member Woods. You have 7 present.
We have a quorum. Let's now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing for a moment of silence. During this moment of silence, please remember to keep in your thoughts the students and faculties impacted by the school shootings in Great Hills, Maryland. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Now the question on the approval of the agenda. Are there any amendments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'd like to pull item 7.3 and 7.5. Also, I think based on the procurement committee, we want to add an item. I guess it'll be 7 point, whatever the next one is regarding the Durham contract. And also another item regarding expeditionary learning, professional development.
Okay, there being no other further amendments, we're ready for a roll call vote.
Board Member Caldwell,
Aye.
Board Member Orgel, Board Member Woods, Board Member Love, Board Member McCormick, Board Member Jones, Board Member Bibbs, Board Member Cornell, Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes.
That's a quorum. The agenda passes. We are now moving to the chairman's report. I just wanted to thank both the staff and board members who come out to some of the community meetings we've had over the past 2 weeks, excluding spring break. We did have several community meetings. We had several in the Whitehaven Empowerment Zone. There was one hosted at Hawkins Mill as well as in American Way Middle. So I do want to thank community members who came out, shared their voice. We want to make sure to always open those opportunities to hear from the community as we make decisions about schools. So thanks to those board members who also hosted them. And I'd like to also just point out that on Thursday we will be having a press conference at BTW announcing a great opportunity for our schools. So I invite all folks to come out and share in that opportunity for a big announcement from a national foundation. And nothing further. Superintendent, your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. A couple things. Let's see if I can get this to work. All right. So I guess first and foremost, want to thank Mr. Caldwell today. Sharon Griffin hosted a Destination 2025, what we call them, sharing the VODs, the voices of destination. So some of the 2025 class mates or the class today, and we were continuing to get input from her. I thought she did a great job. Mr. Caldwell did a great job. Glad to be able to spend time with those kids today. I also want to thank the UEA who hosted a town hall meeting yesterday, and they gave me an opportunity to speak and field questions. We spent about an hour and a half yesterday talking about everything from EL to just general climate and culture in schools, and I think it was very, very enlightening, and I think they appreciated us being there. We're going to continue to do those. And then before I jump into these KPIs, Board, I just want to just share with you, obviously myself and Lynn have been spending a lot of time on the budget. And as we've been looking at the budget, I'm sure you guys know that the National Civil Rights Museum issued a poverty report a couple weeks ago. And what was so striking to me is that poverty levels since 1968 in Memphis have actually gone up. Income gaps have gone up. And so Lynn and I have been thinking very deeply about how the Shelby County schools can try to, in its own way and in a responsible way, address some of the poverty concerns we have here. We think it's very important because we have so many of our employees who actually are parents of students in our district, and we cite this poverty statistic all the time that 40,000 of our kids live in households where the income is less than $10,000. And I know that the board is always pushing us for how do we become, in a responsible way, leaders in different areas. So I want to share this with you because what I'm going to ask the board to do is to, we're going to bring you a plan over the next 30 days to increase all wages here for the Shelby County schools to $15 an hour. And as we talk about it, I think this quote is particularly important, particularly it's almost 50 years to the day. And this is Dr. King at a rally here in Memphis. Now the problem isn't only unemployment. Do you know that most of the poor people in our country are working every day? They are making wages so low that they cannot begin to function in the mainstream of the economic life of our nation. These are facts which must be seen. And it is criminal to have people working on a full-time basis and a full-time job getting part-time income. That was almost 50 years to the day. If you look at some of these other economic indicators, the poverty percentage here in Memphis has gone up. I won't read them, but that just shows that although we've made significant progress, we still have a long way to go. So based on this, what we're going to be asking the board to do is to approve a plan that will get all of our employees at a minimum $15 an hour. I think it gives us an opportunity. Again, we have so many of these employees who work for us. It allows us to make sure that our employees are having a living wage. And I'll share with the board quickly. I was talking to a teacher's assistant in the Chick-fil-A a few weeks ago, and she said she worked at Hamilton, and she said she was thinking about leaving her teacher's assistant position and going to get a job at a mall because she only made $12 or $13 an hour. She could make more money somewhere else. And I think it's just when I know that people across the country are fighting for fast food workers to make $15 an hour, we've got people who spend time with our kids and who are families of our kids here. We think that if we can show you in a responsible way how we can raise those wages, we're going to ask the board to support that. I'm going to ask Lynn, because he's already done the economic analysis, and the reality is that given our financial position, it's not terrible amount of money. So I want to ask Lynn to kind of jump in with these few slides and explain just the number of employees we're talking about. We almost pay, almost all we don't have a true, well, let me say it like this. Most of our employees are close to that $15 an hour anyway, but there are different outliers. So Lynn's going to kind of walk through that just to share the data with the board.
Thank you, Superintendent Hobson. So we looked across all of our employees, and there are 12,500 employees. And we look to evaluate even those who might be salary employees, whether they're making on average below $15 per hour. About 9% of our employees, so nearly 1 out of 10% of our employees are below the living wages. And there's a breakout as well of those employees. About 6% of those 6% are ed assistants. Another 2% are working within our nutrition center. Another 1% work as clerical assistants and office secretaries. And then we also have a number of warehouse and school support staff that work there as well. We also want to just show the disparity between the wages that we have and where employees are ranges from $10.60 to all the way to $14.98. But what you'll notice is that the majority of the individuals are between $13 per hour to about 14.5 per hour, and that affects just to give you the number of individuals. That's about 1,200 individuals that would be who are living below, who are earning below the living wage. The fiscal impact to this, in our mind, is minimum, given the ability to provide some economic equality and allow our employees and many who are parents to now live and to now earn a living wage. The total impact is $2.4 million. That's spread across a number of funds. So when we look at our main operating fund, it's about $900,000. When we look at our federal fund, which will be the second, these are where you have the majority of the ed assistants as well. These are individuals who are funded through Title I, Head Start, other federal grants. And then when you look at nutrition service as well, this gets to the nutrition support staff as well. And then the internal service fund is where the majority of our warehouse workers are at as well. The total includes that 2.4 includes salaries and benefits.
So thank you, Lynn. I think that, again, we think that it's a huge opportunity to lead. It's also a huge opportunity to honor Dr. King's legacy, but more importantly, we just believe it's the right thing to do at a negligible fiscal impact to ensure that we're not contributing to poverty wages, and also to know that so many of these people who work for us have kids who are here in our district. So with that, just wanted to share that with the board. We're working on that. We actually want to bring an actual proposal in the next 30 days so we can see if we can make that happen. And I think with that, if you have any questions, we'll be glad to entertain them.
Mr. Caldwell.
So I thank you for the recognition about Idlewild, but really I was just there to observe, and I thought it was a great luncheon. The district is already talking to kids in the 5th grade because they'll be the first graduates in Destination 2025. So it was important on them what that means, and trying to help them become better leaders and encourage others. So I think that's the way you get things started. So throughout the district, the children and the students have that commitment and understand the importance of it. So I thought it was a great piece to add to Destination 2029 to have the kids motivated as well. And Dr. Griffin did a great job with that. And the Chick-fil-A was great. And your daughter's comments about wanting a new elevator because it hurts her legs to walk up was priceless. I wish you'd been there for that part. Mine would have said she wanted somebody not on the elevator, but until then carry her up the stairs. So it's not just your family, but it happens in mine. But to talk about the more important things, I think this is the right thing to do. I have a couple of questions. So it's my understanding the General Nutrition Fund is not going to affect the general balance. I mean, the general fund balance. Is that the same with the federal programs?
That's correct.
All right,
Yes.
so really the impact to the general fund,
It's only
um,
900,000.
but, pardon me?
It's only 900,000.
Okay, so I think that's important to break that out, but then I would also ask that we're still a community, I forget the way the title of it, eligible for
The community eligible
eligibility
provision.
for food.
We
And so
we are.
I think that's something that does not affect the district's budget, and so I think we're not leveraging that, because we could be feeding people in the summertime. We could be much more creative about getting the food to the homes of those students that are there, or offering them a place. So I think this is great, but if we add that to this program, I think that's, but as important, because we don't know how many of these kids come from families that live in food deserts either.
Right.
So I would ask that you look at that real hard and see what we can do, and try to have a 2 or 3 year plan about how we can grow it and reach more citizens.
Ms. Jones?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So are we on the Durham presentation, or are we on something else?
My report.
Okay, all of this is in your report. Okay, all right. I thought we were talking, but we're talking about all of it. So, I do agree with Board Member Caldwell that we could leverage it probably better. I do know that we have some long-standing summer programs where we do feed, and we probably need to look at how to expand that, because I know we're already doing some of that, but if we could do more, that would be great. But in terms of the wage increase, the increase for the wages, I do support that renegotiated portion of the contract. I have long said, I said when we outsourced, $11 was going to be challenging. We found, and they found that it is. So, but I also recognize that we cannot mandate legally that they actually pay that. And so what I've asked in my conversation is to have an understanding and language in terms of transparency, in terms of what they are actually being paid, that we have those records. And then we can make the decision going forward if the representations in good faith have actually translated into paychecks for individuals. Because if it's just a representation and it's not happening, then I have a problem with that. Even though we can't mandate it, I do think, and I would also suggest that though that the district is ready today for an RFP, it would not be realistic for 18-19. Now maybe we were talking about extending the contract another year in 19-20, but I think we need to keep that in mind if we're going to even consider a RFP. It has to be at least 12 months before we want to take any action. And I'm not suggesting that we do. I'm just saying it can't be 3 or 4 months. There's no way you could shift this operation in a few months unless we were going to do an RFP now to take effect 19-20. And that's all I'm saying.
So I say, Ms. Johnson, you got a little bit ahead of us, because this was just for our employees. So we got, because we had I know we'll talk about that in terms of the renegotiated price, but this was just really a recognition that we have a number of employees who don't make $15 an hour. So this is.
That's why I asked that
Yeah.
were we on tour?
Yeah.
You said.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
I vote for that too.
Mr. Woods?
Superintendent, I want to commend you and your administration for addressing this, particularly around MLK Week, as we commemorate this, the life of Dr. King. Doing the math, the 9% of 12,000 employees is roughly over 1,000 employees that will be impacted by this increase. But I think Board Member Jones' point was still well taken from my perspective, because I often think about, when we have school closures due to weather issues, the board obviously supported us paying the employees that were impacted. But I'm often thinking about our low-wage employees who are cleaning our schools and who are driving our kids to school safely. And so I do think that conversation is right, particularly at this time, because those are the folks who really see our kids the most. But I understand why we can't mandate what we pay them. I would like for us to at least think creatively around what incentives we could we could provide, where those fundings could likely go directly to the employees. I do want us to continue that conversation, but I do think you strike the right balance for making sure we're taking care of our employees. But one suggestion I even had is perhaps, and this is more of an HR related issue, we often talk about career path and how we're growing individuals, and if we can take our individuals that are driving our buses and cleaning our schools out of poverty, the best way we can do is help educate them and to help them find better jobs. Perhaps, one simple incentive could be that you give them an opportunity to apply for jobs when they do come open in our facilities, assistant teachers in our cafeteria area. Perhaps they know, just knowing that every day they come to work, this is not the end all be all of my career with SCS. And if I want to earn more, I can go get an education with Tennessee Reconnect. Everybody can go back to school. But let's give all employees something to believe in, and perhaps this is a pathway to earn more money. But I do appreciate this as the right step, Superintendent. So good work. Thank you.
Mr. Cornell?
I totally support it, and I appreciate your bringing it. And I appreciate the work of the staff to find the money and to make sure the money would be there. And Congress changes and the state legislature changes, and there's always another reform. It's like streetcars, another reform every 15 minutes coming down the pipe. No matter what happens, we still have to have satisfied, dedicated, healthy employees, because a building is only as good as its foundation. And I think that making sure that we continue doing this, and I think what you're doing now is going to have a good impact, so that no matter what comes down the pike in terms of the education and mandates and whatnot, that people are paid better and are more dedicated, and we have better people. I'm not saying we don't have good people, but we can always hire better and better people down the road. So I think this is essential, and I appreciate all the work.
Seeing no other light, Superintendent, I also just want to echo how this is a bold step for us to move forward as a district. I think also providing these type of opportunities for people to make a living wage so that they are able to take care of themselves and their families is saying a lot about how we value our students and our employees. So I appreciate you all bringing this forward. I think it is an important step in the right direction. And I look forward to how we can also think about this as we move forward with our vendors, requiring the same, or at least making that a part of the consideration, that they're paying the folks that we are outsourcing to a living wage. It's important. Moving, any other?
So just the last portion of my report, the KPIs. I think this is the first full cycle. I think we actually did these for the first time last March. So I know it's not a lot, but I think Jessica's going to also point out, where we were last year and some recommendations and how those are have been addressed.
All right, well, while we're getting this set up, just an overview of what this month's KPIs will be is on early literacy measures for grades 1 through 3. I saw it flash across the screen. So there's going to be 3 different things that we look at from our most recent MAP data that we had. One will be, make sure my remote's working, around the median growth percentile. So this is going to tell you in those early grades how much a student moved from the fall administration of MAP to the recent winter administration that happened at the end of last semester. Second, we'll look at the percentage of students meeting the proficiency standard, meaning they are at the 40th achievement percentile or higher compared to the National Bank of MAP takers. And then finally, we'll look at the mean Lexile scores that students are achieving. And this is a way to evaluate the complexity of the text they're able to read at a given point in time. So first up is our look at the reading median growth percentile for students from the fall to the winter, and you can see this over a 3-year period. So across all of our early grades from kindergarten to 3rd grade, we're hovering around the 40th percentile in most grades on our reading growth. And the national average is 50 because it's on a 1 to 100 scale. So you can see that we're not growing at the same rate, but we've continued to sustain a higher rate compared to the first year that we implemented MAP. Second up is the percentage of students that are achieving at least the 40th percentile or higher as an achievement percentile on the MAP reading test. And so here you can see for grades 1, 2, and 3, we've continued to improve the percentage of students that are meeting at least that standard year over the past 3 years. So now we're around the 50th percentile depending on, or 50% of students meeting that 40th percentile in 1st and 3rd grade. All right, if you look at the opposite trend, what percentage of students are falling below the bottom quartile and the 20th percentile, or sorry, 25th percentile or lower, you can also see that we've had a steady decline in most grades in students who are there. So that's a really good sign too, that students that have been in the lowest performing quartile are continuing to improve as well. And our last measure is around the mean Lexile score that students are able to achieve in each of these grade levels. So you can see that we've had the most movement in 1st and 3rd grade in the mean score moving up. So that means that on average students are able to read at a more complex level of text than they were 2 years ago. So also showing positive improvement. However, one thing that's important to keep in context here is this is the same information that was on the previous screen on the dots over time for each of those grade levels, but you will also see in the yellow boxes the range that nationally is considered college and career ready for each of those grade levels for what they ought to be able to read in terms of complex text. So we still have some work to do, but we're seeing some improvements. Any questions so far before we move to recommendations?
Ms. Love?
So I have several questions. First, how much money annually do we spend on maps?
I think
It's
Bill,
about
do you know the answer to
900,000.
that?
It's on the, yeah, it's about 900,000.
900,000. Okay, and how is this data used as it relates to the school's performance? As it relates to teachers, principals, the school's performance? How is the MAPS data used for that?
Sure, I'll defer to the academics team on this.
To Superintendent Hobson, basically how we use this information, we use it in 3 different ways. We use it to assess our growth, our achievement, as well as we look at school performance. So principals look at how well are we doing inside the school with reading, language arts, math, and science in some areas. We also use it to inform how we're going to change instruction inside of the classrooms, as well as we use it for a universal screener, that it determines what intervention we will use with Tier 2 and Tier 3 students. And finally, we use it to guide. Again, our learning continuum lets us know exactly for teachers where students are, what they need to know, and how to move them to the next skill level.
Okay, so this is my issue. We have the MAP data. We're spending $900,000 a year. We had a community meeting in my district. The only thing that was presented was the 10 ready scores, but the MAP data shows that the children are growing. So my question is, how are we using this MAP data that we pay $900,000 for as it relates to the performance of our schools? Because the presentation had nothing about the MAP data. So if we're giving children tests to determine where they are and to see where we need to push them, and to determine information for instruction, and for assessment, and for achievement, and to guide our teachers on how we, how we need to educate the children. How is this MAP data being used as it relates to our schools and our teachers?
I think that definitely, I want to go back to the community meeting. I think when we were in the community meeting, we were looking at the 10 ready data, because we were talking about the alpha, beta, and the delta tracks. But for inside of our district, you're right, Ms. Love, that we do look at their information and see how students are growing over a period of time. Also, it is to inform instruction. So basically, we use it inside the school to help us to determine how do we help grow our Tier 2 and Tier 3 students, what interventions that we use. We also use it with our principals and teachers to see to assess the school health about how they're growing students as a total group. So that's how we use the information. Also, we use it to make sure how do we help schools. Not on this PowerPoint, but we also had a PowerPoint that I think that we sent the board, and it talks about having schools start at low achievement, but they're growing students at the national level.
Okay, that still didn't answer my question.
Okay.
Because the information that was shown at the meeting only had 10 ready. And what it stated was that the children were not growing. So my question is, if we're paying $900,000 for this map data, for this map assessment, how are we using it to show where our children really are? Or are we saying that the 10 ready test is not aligned to the map assessment that our children are forced to do?
So 10 ready and map are two different things, Ms. Love. I think let me start back, because I think one of the most fundamental reasons why we have to use the map is because the state has this whole RTI framework. So you got to test all kids, and then you figure out the second tier and third tier kids for the purposes of the RTI. So that's one uses of it. And then secondly, really more internally, and you guys can talk more about it, the academic team sets goals for each principal in terms of showing where kids are growing just throughout the course of the year, to have some idea of whether they're actually growing. It's not a predictive test that aligns to 10 ready. Like it used to be, we used to have this thing called Discover that said, all right, it's like a practice test. You come in, you practice it, it's predictive. But that's not what the map is for. You want to jump in, Ms. Leon?
Yeah, and there is strong correlation between proficiency on the map and whether kids are on track or mastered for our end of year assessment. But as Superintendent and Dr. Whitelaw have shared, MAP is essentially something that gives teachers and principals ongoing feedback on whether students are growing, whereas TN Ready and those results are sort of the achievement of record for the school from both a state and accountability perspective.
And I also think too, Ms. Love, with regard to the presentation, I'm assuming you're talking about Hawkins Mill.
I am.
Well, when we're talking about the alpha and beta track, this is what the state has already made these determinations. So the data that the state is looking at to determine whether a school should be taken over, where it's ranked, if it should be closed, and all that is based solely on the 10 ready, 10 whatever we call it now, the test results. So I mean, the reality is that how kids are doing on the map is not going to be factored into the state's analysis as to whether that school is going to be in the bottom 5% or whatever recommendations they make regarding interventions.
Okay, so I'll just wrap it up and I'll say this. We are spending $900,000 on the MAP assessments. We are not telling our story. We don't administer the 10 ready test is given to us by the state of Tennessee. Where is the paperwork that tells our story? Because if we're spending $900,000 and we're testing our children based off of this MAP assessment, and the MAP assessment is showing that our children are growing, but the 10 ready test is saying something else. Why are we wasting $900,000 if we're not going to use this to tell our story? And I know this may be over some people's head, but what I'm saying is we're spending money, and when it comes to our principals and our teachers, I don't hear people saying, although 10 ready says this, the assessments that the Shelby County School Board has approved to give to our students, we don't tell that story as it relates to the growth of our children.
Well, so what story, Ms. Love, are we missing on? I mean, I think there's still also fundamentally, because of the RTI structure, we have to do a universal screener. All kids have to get screened universally, because under RTI you have to figure out tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 for the whole purposes of the way the state's mandate works. I think that schools do use MAP, and I know the academic team and ILDs and principals just to gauge what's going on in the year, but at the end of the day, the scoreboard is the 10 ready test. So I think that in terms of like what additional story, I mean, like if
okay, so I'll just give you something to ponder on. We can end this. If 10 ready was to dissolve tomorrow and there was no more 10 ready, what would we use to determine where our kids are, where they should be, and if they're growing?
I agree with that, and I also think too that's part of why we did these KPIs. If I remember Ms. Love, because what we said was we didn't want to solely focus on, you know, as the board monitors performance, we didn't want to solely focus on the 10 ready tests. So this is kind of a check under the hood to give you some indication as to, you know, whether at a minimum kids are growing throughout the year.
Mr. Cornell.
Thank you very much. Let me make sure I'm seeing this correctly. When I looked at the different charts, I saw the same thing. I saw, and the increase with 1, the dip with 2, and the increase again with 3.
Yep,
Okay.
that's correct.
To me, Lexals are extremely important because Lexal is all about how many words a kid knows. And often they don't get the words from home. So we have to add the words at school. And they have to be talked to and read to and whatnot. So question is, what do you have any idea why the drop in 2? Why it's different? It goes up, then there's and then up again.
Yeah, that I can't say just because, you know, we've kind of kept this fairly high level. You know, I think sometimes there are just year-to-year variations, but on the whole, you will see trends in the positive. So I don't know if the academics team has any, you know, sort of insights that they would like to share on what they're seeing
I'm not
in
being
schools.
critical. I'm just
Oh,
wondering.
sure, yeah. I just figured that they're probably better to speak to that than I can.
Okay, did expeditionary learning has been used in which grades? In the primary grades, correct?
So this year, it's in grades K through 5. We began with 3 through 5 in November, K2 in January.
So you had it in K2 till, from when to when?
K2 implementation began this January. Grades 3 through 5 began in November.
And when was this taken, the Lexal check?
This is from December of this
So this
past
is like
calendar year.
this is like the beginning point to look at. Do you think that, let's say we had 1,000 immigrants with families come in, and they don't know their Lexals because they don't speak English, would that drop the number of Lexals that would be tested, or are they on a different test? Are they exempt from the Lexal test because?
They would definitely be a part of the actual Lexile measurement.
Okay, so can we separate basic English speakers from English language learners in this data at some point?
Sure.
Okay, and can you give me self-identified boys and girls? In other words, I'd like to know male and female, the data broken down by male and female. We know boys at some point are slower than the girls, and
That's true.
and that includes the school board. So I would like to see that. And so thank you for bringing this. It's very interesting. But I think Lexal, in my opinion, I think of all the tests we've ever had, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'd like to know more. But the Lexal measure may be one of the most important and easy to test things. I should know a better word than thing, but it may be one of the easiest to test and best indicators that we've ever had. And I agree with Board Member Love. If we are making progress, and if expeditionary learning and the reading and the more liberal way of teaching is making progress, then we need to let our parents and our communities know. And we don't need to depend upon the State Board of Education or DeVos to tell them what's happening in our schools.
One thing to note about MAP is a formative assessment. So 10 ready is summative. That means it measures the progress for the entire school year. MAP is formative. It's given 3 times. So you have 3 benchmarks. So you can have a high rich score for a particular student in a particular grade, but that rich score may not equate to the kid being on grade level. So for example, I could be a 2nd grade student, my rich score should be 400. After the first benchmark, it becomes adaptive. it puts me down based on how I perform on the first benchmark. So in December, my RIT score may go from 150 to 280. I've had RIT growth, but I'm not at the 400 level, which is required for that grade level.
Well, see, the beauty, in my opinion, of what you just said is that whereas we know the state cannot explain their growth formula called TBOS, they've not explained it to anybody in this room. Have they? Raise your hand if you, okay. But where a kid is may depend upon the census tract they come from. But how much growth they do can be contributed by the teacher. So see, I see this as much more valid. Right now, the state is saying, well, we have these failing schools when we have a failing economy for a whole group of people. We have a failing system, economic system for a whole group of people. And then they're trying to blame the schools. But this can tell us where the teachers are actually having an effect. I think I like it. I appreciate you bringing it.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. Mr. Caldwell?
So, a couple of questions. One of the things I thought we were doing this data for, and I know this is a high-level thing, but I would say it's also to get thought involved about why from one year to another you had increases and you're not seeing it in every grade level, and maybe that indicates that the weaker teachers in a certain grade level versus other, or they backtrack. But I don't see that this has anything to do with the value of MAP, because MAP is just the messenger. And so what this is more, to me, would be indicative of is that are the interventions we're doing, are they being as successful? And so it's more of should be a discussion about to lead us to finding the right interventions, as opposed to saying that the test that measures this is flawed, because other districts are using this same test, and they may, so it might be interesting to lead us to go to another district that is using MAP scores, but then their interventions may be different, and they're actually, if there's any kind of correlation between the Tennessee 10 Ready test versus other state measures. But to me, this is more about letting a wake-up call for the interventions we're using, and making sure that's improving just generally the ability of the students, or the achievement of the students. Is that the right
Definitely.
way to look at it? I got to ask a question. So is that the right way to look at it? That this is not so much about the test as it is the interventions.
You're exactly right, because as we continue to look at Tier 2 and Tier 3 students, and we look at Achieve for our literacy, because that's our literacy intervention, then we're able to match the Lexile level to definitely what level that we're going to be teaching that student, or helping that student with the Achieve reading. So every month we're looking at the intervention. Also, we're progress monitoring those students that are in Tier 2 and Tier 3 to see if they're moving out of those tiers. So you're exactly right.
Seeing no further lights, I did have a question about, I guess this is a follow-up to Mr. Caldwell's point about the interventions, because once parents, and I'm just thinking about from my own standpoint, once parents receive these MAP scores, which we do, what's the next step? So are we sending something home to parents that gives the actual username and password for the interventions that their kids are doing within schools, so that they can also do those at home? What's the next step past getting the data? And I understand that teachers and or principals would then alter instruction, but I think there's a disconnect if we are not sharing that information with parents. To Ms. Love's very valid point, how is that then information then relayed to community? Because for me, once I got the MAP score, the next step would be the intervention piece. And it would be, how do I help or support my daughter at home with that intervention piece? She wasn't where she needed to be in math. So should I be doing something different besides spending more money to hire a tutor? what would be what they're doing, mimicking, how would I be mimicking that in school that would also show me that that altered instruction is supporting her. So I think that's where probably a lot of that disconnect, and we just need to do a better job of communicating that to parents.
So, and I think we'll own that,
Yeah.
Ms. Ava and Ms. Love, because I think that what happens is, too, a lot of times it depends on what happens at the school level, right? Because I'm like, even with my kids, I get the MAP data and we do the parent-teacher conference, and to the extent there's different interventions or strategies, I mean, my kids' teachers at the principal's direction sit down and go over it. So I think that, maybe we just need to do a better job from a district approach with mandates and supporting our schools and saying, hey, here's how you share with teachers or with the students, and here's kind of the playbook or the script when you're dealing with parents, because I know that happens at least some schools.
And Superintendent Hobson, I just wanted to add as well that NWA today said they'll be partnering with us on next semester and having workshop for parents and helping parents understand what is it like to be at this point in the summer, and then also what it's like to be in the winter, along with PACE department.
So does that mean that the Superintendent's Learning Academy will be doing a assessment at the beginning that then allows us to be able to track some of these students? Because I think what we've learned is when we began tracking students, it's better for us to be able to think about those interventions, whether it's in first grade or third grade, and understanding obviously that K2 piece is where we're going to be focusing a lot. But I do wonder how the assessments from where we are, these MAP assessments for those students who are attending the Superintendent's Learning Academy, how is that information shared or will be shared? And then loop back. The loop back is what I'm thinking about. Thinking about the loop back.
Absolutely. So yes, we did a pre and post and all the assessments this summer. And also, I want to say we did a presentation for the board. And
Speaking to the microphone.
I'm sorry. We did a presentation for the board and to talk about the MAP scores and the growth in that. Also, I know we're working with Brad's team to really track the data for the students in the Summer Learning Academy. We have some preliminary data, and that we want to see how the students perform towards the end of the year.
Just my last point, I didn't say it, Mike did, that boys learn a little slower than girls do. But I just did want to add that Ms. Love, as we think about how we support our students, she also has Ms. Ashley Ash, who's a Mananza student that's following her. So the many ways that we can think about helping and support our students, Ms. Love is giving a great example of that. So I just wanted to give Ashley a shout out in the audience.
Could you wave your hand, Ash?
Great. So just very quickly, our last slide, my remote will wake back up, is so like Superintendent Hobson mentioned earlier and Board Member Avant requested from us, I think a couple months back, now that we've done a full year of KPIs, we can actually report back to you on the recommendations that we gave you last time around and what's going on with those. So first, we noted last time around that we wanted to continue to implement college and career ready curriculum materials. So you can see on the right hand side that at the elementary level means using journeys for foundational skills and also Eureka Math and expeditionary learning for engaging in high quality standards aligned learning experiences. Secondly, we talked about deploying math and literacy coaches to schools in order to support educators' transition to the new standards. So now those positions have been converted into math and literacy advisors. So they still are going out to schools and providing PD and co-planning and things like that. And there's also a lot of work with the instructional leadership teams that every school has to make sure that they're really understanding and working through those new standards. Finally, a couple of the community partnerships and family partnerships we wanted to highlight last year were around Team Read and academic parent-teacher teams. So first you can see the number of Team Read volunteers has expanded to more than 1,000, and they're serving over 1,200 students, and those are all elementary age students. And then also we've gotten back some survey data from APTT teachers, and 74% of them have said that they want to continue to use that model in their classrooms. And we've also seen, based on their winter map data, that students whose parents participated in APTT have slightly higher map outcomes than students who are school-wide at those schools that have APTT.
Ms. Bibbs?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to see the information around the KPIs around community partnerships, but of course this is a subject that I like talking about. I think with a district as large as what we are, I'm ready to hear more about other initiatives around true community partnerships in support of everywhere now that we're going out. People are talking about how can I get engaged, where can I be in order to support our kids, and I think we need to have more opportunities of engagement other than just Team Read and APTT. I know those are the ones you use for the KPIs, but I'm just going to put it back on record again around what that should look like.
So I think great point, Ms. Business. That was from last year, so I know that Dr. Ray and his team can't wait to lay out of that.
Absolutely.
Those are just citing from last year.
So I know April the 10th is vastly approaching, so more to come April the 10th, and we'll talk about some of the great work. I know Dr. Lori Phillips, she's hit the ground running. We're trying to engage the community, and I'm looking forward to her presentation on April the 10th.
And Board Member Bibbs, one thing we can do moving forward to reflect the new work that we're doing is to include 2018 recommendations that are on top of or replacing some of the 2017 recommendations. So we'll do that in future presentations.
Mr. Cornell, it's your second time.
Are we debating?
We're trying to keep the meeting moving. that's
When
all.
it came to the homework help, I appreciate having another homework help at Willow Elementary. We had, I think, 200 or more people. But I noticed some church members in my district wanted to get their churches involved in helping kids with their homework. So when it comes to community outreach, I just hope we keep that in mind, that there may want to do a special outreach to churches who want to help the kids in the church or the neighborhood, and make sure they know about the next homework help workshop, and maybe have something special for them.
Yes, sir. We'll definitely do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other lights? I think that Ms. Bibbs was from earlier. You didn't have another comment, Ms. Bibbs? Okay. Thank you.
So that concludes my report. I do want to just say, for the record, just so proud of them. Congratulations to Hamilton High School, to East High School for winning the championship, to Douglas High School, and to Whitehaven High School. And I will take 15 seconds, Miss Avan, as a University of Memphis Tiger. I'm so excited about our new coach today, and I think we're back on the road to the Final Four stars today.
Just on that, do we want to consider counter-offering and seeing if we can keep him at East?
I don't, those type of public resources available.
Well,
Mr.
Madam
Woods?
Chair, I think that leads to my point. I have told the superintendent I may not be able to be on the board because I have accepted his offer to coach at East High School.
Oh.
And, well, that's not what we talked about?
Nah, deny. Well, Ms. Caldwell?
If he's done that, I want to put a policy in place that before he hires any high school basketball coaches, that we know how much they're paying them. and then the justification for it.
That's right. Well, I do, Superintendent, just to take liberty just a moment. We really are very happy, I think, about a hometown boy being able to lead our Tigers, and I think it means a lot for how we will continue to have great talent in this city. And I think this is an opportunity for us to think about how we will be supporting student athletes moving forward, right? I mean, we talked a lot about increasing academics, but for some of our kids, athletics is a way for them to move forward in life, college and career. So I just think that's an opportunity for us to think about that, board, and how we're supporting athletics and our students over the next fiscal year. So if we're nothing further, Superintendent, we're going to move on to 7.1.
An item that we're all excited about. It's give me a second. It's the the sub grant to the Choice Neighborhood Initiative, Urban Strategies. I know you may want to speak to it, but I think there's a lot of exciting things going on over in that neck of the woods, and we have received a grant, and it's just asking the board to accept the grant.
Seeing no lights, I will just say I'm in full support of us providing these kind of opportunities. It is obviously a substantial amount of money that's going directly to the families of South City and the students, which would be LaRose and BTW. So we're excited about, I'm very excited about this opportunity for our kids. And I think Chris probably would echo that, because it's a school in his district. Chris. Yeah, I'm just making fun. I was just saying you probably echo that these resources for a school in your district. I'm sure.
Shake your head, yes.
7.2.
So
7.2.
7.2 is for the materials needed for the Superintendent's Summer Learning Academy, instructional materials up to $500,000.
Seeing no lights. Oh, Ms. Love.
So this doesn't directly relate to the instructional material, but I guess the parent piece. The parent piece as it relates to the Superintendent's Learning Academy. Is there a way that we can, so I'll say we're not in the business of adult education anymore, but what I hear is we have a lot of parents who want to go back, to school or to receive their GED. So is there a way that we can connect with whoever has the grant to provide support for our parents during the summer while their children are in the Superintendent's Learning Academy?
Great question, Ms. Love. I'll connect with Dr. Brown, Terrence Brown, who's over CCTE, and maybe we can develop a partnership to have something for parents this summer.
Okay. And even during the Learning Academy time, having some job fairs at those schools, because I'm trying to think of more ways where we can get the parents more involved, so we can find ways to keep them in the school during the summer. We can hopefully continue that out through the year.
So, Ms. Love, you've actually kind of hit on some of the things that's going to be in the family and community engagement plans. That's one of the things that we bring forward is our job fairs for parents. I know Dr. Phillips, she is definitely has experience in this area. She did that at Bell Forest. So yes, that's something we could definitely incorporate.
Seeing no further lights. 7.3.
7.3 was pulled.
Oh, I'm sorry.
7.4 is for some supplemental books for our special needs students. I think we went over this in the academic committee.
Seeing no lights. 7.6. 7.5 has been pulled. 7.6.
7.6 is for the printed materials for the high school curriculum. I think we went over this in the academic committee too.
Seeing no lights. 7.7. 7.7.
7.7 is back to expeditionary learning curriculum materials. I think we've had several board meetings, academic committee meetings around this, and I guess we just need a decision.
Seeing no lights. 7.8.
7.8 is actually the contract for the PD for the EL. I think we went over this in the meeting too.
Seeing no lights. 7.9.
7.9 is for the MAP test. the map assessment. It's the NW. So we actually, I think it's reduced a little bit this year because of the number of schools, and we're prepared to answer questions. I think we have a presentation. The board wants to go through a presentation. We figure there may be some questions. Okay.
Yes. Who's sharing?
Our Director of Assessment and Accountability, Brant Riedel, will be presenting on NWEA.
Okay, so I'll just walk you through the PowerPoint just with some general information in here. If you have questions, let me know. Just some background information on MAP. As the superintendent was saying, one of the main uses is for RTI, so we give it 3 times per year for that. It also has other uses though. We talked about it being a formative assessment and something that teachers can use to drive instruction. To give you a sense of the scope, over 75,000 students have taken a MAP test. This year we mainly focus on grades K through 10, although if schools want to give it in 11th and 12th grade, they can. So again, one thing I did want to point out is that it's an adaptive assessment. So some of the differences we're seeing between MAP and TN Ready as far as growth. One thing could be the nature of the assessment, and that MAP will actually adjust to where the student is. So in other words, if you're a 4th grade student but you're functioning more at a 3rd grade level, an adaptive test will actually, if you miss a question, it will bring the test down more to meet you where you are. And kind of the whole goal of MAP is to see exactly where you are, whereas a TN Ready test is really a grade level test. So there's some possibility of it being a little more sensitive in that sense of seeing where the student actually is and potentially measuring growth. So there's assessment, it will give you growth, it will give you proficiency where they are at this point. Then it will inform in the sense that you get individual results for each student, but you also get class results and school level and of course district level results. Then as far as where it takes you from there, that would probably be more, the academic team could give you more information on that, but essentially it allows teachers to drive instruction, to set goals as far as schools and teachers and are concerned and at the class level. And also just professional development with teachers talking to each other and some of these professional learning groups, comparing results and how they're using those results. I talked some about teachers already. They can set goals for students and work in that way. One of the big things that MAP does that I think it does better than some of the other assessments we've had for this purpose is measure growth across time. And basically that's because of its national norms, and they have norms for both where a student should be at this point and also how much a student should grow from point A to point B. So that's one thing that both teachers and administrators can use. Teachers looking more at their individual classes, administrators looking more at the big picture, their school or their district. And then potentially from that, driving instruction, or at the district level, evaluating interventions or deciding what interventions might be needed. This is just an example of some of the data. So with MAP, we talked quite a bit about both achievement, where you are now, and growth. So this is looking at it more from the district level and schools. And this is just a particular example. It'll vary if you pick different grades and different subjects. But just a quadrant report showing you some of these are high achieving and high growth, some more low growth, low achieving, just basically the 4 possibilities there, and different schools fall in different categories. So in our district we have a lot of low achievement, but you can also see that some of those low achieving schools, kind of where they are now, that they are making some significant growth. Although the main point of MAP is not to necessarily predict TN Ready, we did look at some correlations there just to make sure that the students that are doing better on MAP are also doing better on TN Ready. So most of you are probably familiar with correlations, but a 1 would be a perfect correlation. If you see a correlation of 1 between 2 tests, somebody's probably making up data. So you're looking more realistically, 0.7, 0.8, something like that is a strong correlation. So that's what we're seeing in grades 3 through 8. If you had no correlation between the 2 tests, you'd see something around 0, and even worse than that, if they were going in different directions, you would see something negative. So overall, we're seeing basically what you would expect, strong correlations, but not perfect correlations. So the students who are doing better on MAP are also doing better on the TN Ready test. Now for 3 through 8, we only have just this 1 year because TN Ready was canceled back in 2016. In contrast with the end of course test, we do have 2 years worth of data looking at MAP and the outcomes on the TN Ready end of course test. These are mainly given in high schools, although we do have some middle school students who take Algebra 1, and in some of our middle schools, some of our middle school students will take geometry. The correlations here are similar. In some cases, they're not quite as high. I'm not sure what the difference is between the high school and the 3 through 8, but the correlations are similar, just a little bit lower in the high school. Again, this is an adaptive test. So one thing may be that MAP is not specifically giving an English 1 test or an English 2 test, whereas TN Ready, it is giving a specific English 1, English 2, Algebra 1. But still, despite that, the correlations are good. Another thing that it does is that it looks at college readiness as far as ACT. And basically, college readiness benchmarks on ACT, they have them for each subject, and basically it's the likelihood that about a 50% likelihood that you would get a B in a related course in college. So these are studies that ACT has done that if you get a 22 on the reading portion of their test, you're likely to get a B, or you're about 50% chance of getting a B in a related subject in college during your first year. So what MAP has done is mapped out their test about what kind of score you would need to get on MAP in order to get that college readiness benchmark for both math and reading on the ACT. So this is just a chart showing where we rank nationally. So the national bar is higher than ours as far as the percent of students that are college ready. But the main point being that that's something that MAP offers, not just trying to predict TN Ready, but trying to predict ACT. MAP does provide a number of supports. We've gotten a number of PD sessions from them that have targeted different groups. Some of them have targeted the building testing coordinators, some of the PLC coaches at the school, some principals, So over the last few years, we've had several of those. They do have a research department that we've consulted with trying to interpret some of these data that we've seen with growth and what we should make of those compared to some of the national samples. They also have some data coaching, which would be after we have our data, talking with them about how to interpret some of that. So how can parents use the information? We've already had some examples of schools who use the information and make sure that that information gets to parents. There's something called a RIT score, which is just a scale score for MAP, and that is a scale that goes across all grade levels. So you should see that going up if you're a parent, and it is a test that the reports keep up with not only your growth within the year, but your growth across years. So there are some College Explorer tools. In other words, you can see what, based on the scores that you're getting on MAP, how does that relate to different colleges as far as the median ACT score that typically students get at those colleges. There's a parent guide to MAP growth, and then NWA has talked about doing a parent workshop. And that's basically the slide presentation.
Mr. Caldwell?
So based on what you're saying, that this is adaptive and it doesn't look at the overall level of where the child is, so to me, this would be more correlated on the growth aspect of the 10 Ready test than it would be the overall level. Is that looking at it the right way?
Yeah, it really should be both, in the sense of students who are scoring higher on TN Ready should also be scoring higher on the MAP, but it does have that growth component that could potentially be correlated. They are different tests, though, in that if you take the grade level TN Ready test in 6th grade, it is 6th grade material. So it could be that you just don't perform well on that at all, and it doesn't really see your growth from one year to the next. So it's possible MAP could be more sensitive to that.
But you just said that it's adaptive. So if somebody is not on grade level, it's going to lower where they're starting. So it will predict the growth, which ought to be comparable to 10 Ready, but it's not going to predict if a child's going to be proficient. It'll just say that they should be doing better, and based on where they are, that might get them to proficient.
Mm-hmm. The one challenge that we have in being able to answer that question, Board Member Caldwell, is that we're not going to get individual student level TVOS growth. Right. So we wouldn't be able to see, the growth on MAP versus the students' growth on TVOS, because we get the TVOS scores at a much higher aggregated level. Okay,
but but it would seem to me that y'all, rather than just, the MAP test is going to tell you that the child needs some intervention. Right. Now, the level of the intervention, it may even tell you, that they're at the lowest point. But it would seem like to me you need to look at also where they are overall, and look at both of those if you're going to look at it as something to drive, and give you an accurate feel about where we are going to be on the standardized test. Is that correct?
Yes. So,
I think that ought to inform your interventions, both those things, not just what you did on MAP.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then I think it's important with what Dr. Bird said, because my kids' a summative assessment is not the same as what you get at the end of the year, right? Or do I have it backwards? Okay, what's the one before then?
Formative.
Formative. Yeah. So some kids can remember that bit of information they got at that point of the year when you're doing the assessment, but for them to remember each part of it for the summative assessment is a different skill that the child would need.
If we'll be measuring for the entire year.
Right.
So really, the strong indicator is actually how well they perform on the spring benchmark, which is like we did, I think, February 26th through March 9th. So it's the third benchmark you do, the fall, winter, spring. It's supposed to be the closest predictor for 10 ready. But when you think about adaptive and you think about TVAS, yes, schools can really look and see where kids are because you walk in with a scale score based on your end of year assessment. So a lot of schools and a lot of school leaders, they basically take that data, then look where their kids are, and they tier their kids based on how well they perform. So you see some schools doing departmentalization, ability grouping, because they want to basically be able to take the intervention and match it to all the kids in the room, as opposed to having 20 different learning styles, 20 different scale scores. It's more clustered when you're able to target a specific number.
So is one of those approaches better than the other? Or have you seen data that tells you one's better than the other?
So, I mean, I guess that would be a personal statement. When I was a principal, I did ability grouping. So I looked at the data over the summer. I grouped the kids based on performance. I had, my class was broken off like 01, 02, 03, 4 sections. We departmentalized. So that way teachers could then take that data and know which intervention to target the kids with, as opposed to having 20 different learning styles inside the classroom. You see a lot of schools doing similar techniques to that now.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Love?
Can you go back to page 8? No, it's not.
I'm sorry, which one am I going back to?
Page 8.
Page 8, okay.
So when we look at our 5th grade math, and we see that they're declining from 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, do we have an answer to that, or do we know why?
I'm sorry, I missed part of the question. Do we know why?
Okay, when we look at math, percentage of students meeting college readiness benchmarks, in 5th grade, they're at a higher percentile, but it seems like 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, they decline. So do we know why? Are we looking at that?
I don't know why, no. That would be a good thing to pursue, but off the top of my head, I don't know why that would be.
But Ms. Love, we are looking at, you brought out a great point, that what we are starting to do to look at feeder patterns. So how our 5th grade students are ending at the end of the year and how they're entering in 6th grade at the very beginning of the year, and looking at the skills that were lost and looking at what we need to do in 6th, 7th, and 8th for our middle grades. So we are looking at that very closely, as well as we're looking at our 8th grade data, trying to figure out now how do we support our 9th graders as they enter into high school. So we are beginning to really look at that feeder pattern.
Okay. And can you go back to the slide that had the little red bubbles?
With all the schools? Slide 5.
Yeah, 'cause we don't have this. Okay, so I have a question. When we look up here at the low achievement, high growth, and can you explain this to me?
Okay, so so let's start out with growth. So growth would be up from the horizontal line, and that horizontal line is the national average. So if your school is above that horizontal x-axis, then they are growing at a rate that is higher than the national average.
Okay.
However, it's also looking at achievement, and by achievement, they mean where are you right now? So in other words, are you at the 40th percentile? Are you at the 80th percentile? And so that vertical axis is actually the national average for achievement, basically the 50th percentile. So if you had an average school, they would be at the 50th percentile. So ideally, a school would be in high achievement and high growth, that upper right quadrant. So they're both above the national average as far as achievement. Their average student is at the 60th percentile or something like that. but they're also growing at a faster rate than the nation. Most of our schools, at least on this particular grade level, the success schools are the ones who, yes, they're low achieving, so we still have some work to do. They're in that upper left-hand quadrant, but they are at least growing faster than the national average, so they're getting closer to being in the upper right quadrant.
Okay, so my question, so I'm looking at Delano Elementary, excuse me? I can't see over there. I'm looking at Delano Elementary, and I see it says high achievement, low growth. And I know this probably means that our children, they achieve really well. And once you get to a certain point, they really can't grow anymore, right? Because if you're already at the 95 percentile, you can't.
Yeah, technically anybody can still grow. The question is, can the test pick up on it? So do you hit a ceiling? This test is actually pretty good at going, and if you're really high achieving, it should be able to pick up on growth because it keeps adjusting to where you are. So as tests go, this would be pretty good at picking up on growth. But in general, it could be more difficult to show growth if you're already high achieving, but certainly not impossible. We have very high achieving schools who have high growth, both based on this measure and based on TVOS.
Okay, because I'm also looking in the top left-hand corner where it says low achievement but high growth. So that goes back to the question, how are we using this data? And it leads me to ask other questions, but I'll just set up time to talk to Dr. Griffin. Because when we look at some of these schools and we look at the area that they're in, we have saturated areas where the achievement is low, although some of the growth may be higher. So how are we using that to create a curriculum or instruction to help children in that area versus saying everybody's going to do this?
Mr. Caldwell, was it just a statement, right? Mr. Caldwell?
So I was just going to add on to what Board Member Love was saying. So it would seem absolutely the farther you get on the horizontal, I mean on the I don't remember axis, whatever the other, but the one that measures growth. I mean the one that measures achievement. So so you want everybody over to the northwest quadrant. It's up top and still growing, but it's not mathematically possible.
Use your microphone, Mr. Caldwell.
It's not mathematically possible. If you're at 40, if you're at the 40 level, you got a big area that you can improve. But percentage-wise, you're not, to go from to 85 to 90, that's got to be harder than to go from a 40 to a 60.
I may be getting a little beyond my expertise, but NWA their norms are based on where you start also to some degree. And so I'm not disagreeing with you. I think there is more room for growth at some of the schools, and growth may be easier there, but I would say it's always possible. It's always possible for a student, but especially when you start looking at a school level. No school has all students at the 99th percentile. So there's always some room for growth, but yes, it may be easier for certain schools than others.
And I would just add that if you look at the bottom, it shows the percentile. So we're defining high growth or high achievement here as above the 50th percentile. So as you can see, there are folks who are in the high achievement category that are at the 54th percentile, and there is definitely room to still grow when you're at that. I mean, even our furthest out, which looks like J.P. Freeman, they're only around the 89th percentile based upon what I'm looking at there. So even that school, the furthest out on the achievement, still has room for growth.
And I'm sure Ms. Bibbs will appreciate this, but this is why what goes on in middle college is so remarkable, because when you're top 5% in growth and achievement, it does show that you can have kids who are very, very high and still grow a whole lot too.
Mr. Cornell?
But I had one last.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. But the point, but that's been the whole thing about the school reform. You know, you want to focus on growth, because if you're a low performing district and you just constantly try to meet the high achievement level, you know, it's not going to build morale, and it's not going to keep you invested to keep growing. But the bottom line is, we want everybody up there, regardless of growth, at the very high level on achievement, because that's what's going to make them succeed in life and in college and everything else. So growth becomes less important the higher the achievement is.
That's very fair. That's a very fair statement. I think, yeah, I mean, you know, it wouldn't concern me if you had kids in the high echelon and they're proficient, you know, and they're college ready, you know, versus somebody who is, you know, very low and not growing. Yeah.
So we could be successful in preparing people for the ACT, but they didn't grow that much from last year. But they're going to get in college. They're going to be able to take the subjects they want and get the scholarships, and, you know, that they need. Right. But they just didn't grow as much. And to your point, that's exactly why middle college is, you know, is a unique, you know, school.
Yeah, that's correct.
Mr. Cornell?
Well, first of all, I love this chart, because you can take statistics and get some sense of maybe a snapshot of reality with a chart like this. I do want to go back to the college ready one. Was that 8? Okay. As Board Member Love was mentioning, we have a drop in, looks like a drop in math. Now, I got a question. Is there a population drop at the same time? Are dropouts figured into the non-achievement?
I don't think dropouts were taken into consideration. So our enrollment does go down across grades. So these would just be active students or people who are around to take the test. Yeah.
All right. So the definition of the enrollment is those that are actually enrolled and continue to enroll.
And took the test.
So
yeah.
When you say college and career readiness, is there a different scale for college and a different scale for career or post-secondary? Are you really basically saying post-secondary, or what are you saying?
This particular measure is strictly the college readiness benchmark for ACT. So they have certain scores, like for reading 22, math the 22, that they say if you reach that score, there's about a 50% chance of you making a B your first year of college in that subject. So this is strictly, it really doesn't have career in there, this particular slide. It's college readiness as defined by ACT.
Okay, so you may, so this is college readiness, and
but it does say career at the top of the slide. I just noticed that.
I understand. Right. But 5th grade doesn't take the ACT, so how do you reconcile that?
Reconcile what? I'm sorry.
Having the 5th grade at one level and the 10th grade at another level, and you said that this is based on ACT?
Right. So these are basically so the MAP test from 5th grade up does ACT predictions. So this would suggest that our 5th graders at that point are more on track to be college ready than they are later on. So why that is, I don't know. That's concerning. You know, in a low achieving district, if we're not growing, then the kids would be falling more behind, which is what that's suggesting, at least with this particular measure.
Right, I got you. So you're saying they're taking tests that should indicate what they would take on the ACT, and what they would get on the ACT indicates what they would do in college.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So just to throw something out, we know that 5th grade math is different than 10th grade math because you're now going into algebra 1 and 2. And there are some students that can do math, can do consumer math, but they're not good at algebra. Could that be something?
Sure. I think the farther away you get from the event, the harder it is to predict. So in other words, trying to take 5th graders and see whether they'll do well on the ACT is more difficult than taking a 10th grader and seeing where they are and trying to predict where they will be on the ACT. So that kind of may be what you're getting at.
And ACT is definitely going to have algebra.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore I see what you're saying. Now, two things that teachers have mentioned as far as the map, as far as the Northwest assessment, is that sometimes kids are asked to do that assessment on computer, and yet in pre-K and 1st grade they haven't learned how to use the computer. At what year are we starting this now? Or, I think one time we asked 1st graders to do it. Are we
We
now
have
waiting a while?
kindergartners doing math.
Hmm?
Kindergarten is where it starts with math.
We're going to do what now?
Kindergarten is the lowest grade that takes math.
And is that on computer?
Yes.
Well, some teachers tell me they can't use the computer. Very well. Okay. Another thing teachers have said is that when a kid goes into, and I understand the assessment, I understand the value of that assessment, because that assessment goes up and down to try to find out exactly where that kid's level is.
Mm-hmm.
But they say sometimes when it goes up and stays up, that the kid can't answer the question, and gets disillusioned. So if you would just check the way they do that, so kids can maybe have some successes and then have it go up to see how far up the scale they can go and then down. But that's what some teachers have said. And again, using a computer, I don't think Head Start trains kids on computers. I don't know. Do they? But anyway.
One thing to point, it was not the reason we chose MAP as an assessment. Okay. We think it's a really strong tool, but another benefit, given that all of our students will be taking online assessments over the next couple of years, is that through NWEA and MAP, they're obviously doing that and getting more opportunities to interface with technology. So this year our high school students will be taking online assessments, and next year all students across our district will be taking online assessments. And in part because of MAP, they'll have some practice doing that.
Okay, I guess what I'm saying is that getting the practice is good, but there is a point at which the primary grades assessment on a computer is more about their skills on the computer.
Mr. Woods? You had a comment? It was on her. All right, so Dr. Griffin, I think some of the takeaways from the information that was shared is really how we might utilize feeder patterns, interventions, and how this correlates with the academic plan. And I would suggest bringing some of this data for us to unpack a bit in the academic retreat on Friday. As a way to think about some of the things that board members are having questions about. So if the presentation that we had earlier, as well as the presentation on the KPIs, I think will be helpful in our discussion on Friday. .10, Teach for America.
Yes, this is a contract to contract with Teach for America to find up to 75 teachers.
No. Oh, you're wrong. Are there, if there's no questions, we're going to move on to Ms. Bibbs?
Okay, we said we are going for 75. What's their number in their core each year?
Can you answer that, Ms. Small? I think what we've done in the past, Ms. B, I don't know if this answers your question. I think the last 2 years we've done 50.
Right. Okay, so we're doing an
increase
increase
it to
of
75.
Okay.
Mr. Orgel?
I just wanted to advocate for this. I know you're about to move on it, but I think it's a great program, and it might be it's a drop in the bucket number of teachers compared to how many teachers we have in the system. But what I like about it is it brings young people to our city. So there's a collateral effect to it, and a lot of them stay, and a lot of them stay in education, and they didn't consider being teachers other than this program. And I know they get dispersed pretty well around, so it's not an impact in one school, it's an impact in one place or not, but it's highly educated people bringing new ideas into our city that stay and contribute to our economy and contribute to our city, and may have never looked at Memphis. So I think there's other factors in here, but and I know we've still got great teachers, and a lot of great teachers mentor these young people. But anyway, I just wanted to advocate for it.
Seeing no additional lights? I did have a question about just if there's, Ms. Smalls, thinking about of the teacher prep programs, those, if I could just see the numbers about those that have correlations to growth scores for students based on how we're placing some of those teachers. 7.11.
Miscellaneous cafeteria supplies in the amount of $264,000. Yeah.
Seeing no lights, 7.12.
7.12, if the board recalls, the board authorized us to purchase, I think it was around $15 million worth of computers back in September. And we have hit that amount. We have about another $4 million worth of computers that we'd like to purchase. So what we actually did was look to the state-approved list, which we can use. And I think those prices are actually slightly lower than the last bid that we had. So the reason we're bringing it like this is because we would either have to amend the contract to do an additional $4 million or do another bid, or we can use the state list. And we were asking the board to allow us to use the state list for these additional purchases.
Ms. Jones?
So when you say use the state list, just how does that work? There are approved named vendors. We just pick the one we want?
So the state went out
and procurement.
Yeah, I think the state went out and did an RFP and selected, I guess, I'm not sure if it was one vendor or multiple vendors, 3 vendors that they buy from.
So I guess my only concern is in light of our lack of diversity spend, how is this going to help that bottom line?
I believe there's a minority vendor.
I'm sorry, what was the answer?
The vendor who's in our area, who would service our area, is Thomas Computers, and he is a NWBE vendor.
So why wouldn't we do an RFP as we've always done?
So we could. I think that we could also just amend our original ask. We just thought that this was the most expedient way to do it, particularly since the price was lower and it's a minority vendor.
I guess from prior experience, there are a number of minority vendors in the local area, only one on this list. So basically, we're shutting everyone else out and only allowing this one. And I guess I would like to see diversity, but to me, diversity means the number of minorities, as well as the fact that they're the minority. So I'm just troubled that we would just choose one from the list and exclude all these other local vendors who do the same thing. But I understand if price point is what you're looking at, I would hope this would not be how we're going to proceed, because that means that no one else, this vendor would just get everything and no one would get anything. And I just don't think that's a correct way to proceed when we're trying to include the broader business community as a whole. We're selecting and choosing to go with the process that only has one.
So I think that because this, Ms. Jones, was really just kind of a continuation of the first actual spin. That's why I was a little more comfortable with going to the state approved list. But I still, at the end of the day, if the board's not comfortable with it,
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if this is going to be how we do business, then we won't be committing to include anyone but this one vendor.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think offlines I need to talk to legal counsel about some possible conflicts which I do have a problem with. I don't know why we would go in this direction given the legal climate that I know exists.
Okay.
That just doesn't make sense to me.
So I think maybe what we should do, Ms. Jones, is because that concerned me too. So I think that perhaps I'll ask Ms. Irvin to have an attorney-client meeting to brief us on those issues. Perhaps we should have an attorney-client meeting maybe, because I don't want to talk about it in public, but there's some underlying concerns that we just may need to talk about. Okay.
Mr. Woods.
Thank you. Superintendent, obviously, thinking back when I was working in government, the idea of having to procure contracts, I know you have a great team to do that process, but when you do have, when you can use federal procurement processes, state procurement process, and particularly still identify local vendors, I think that's a good thing for the district because you only have so much bandwidth when it comes to the procurement process. So obviously I assume the district will still look for efficiencies, cost savings, to make sure that we can still move forward on those type of things. So I can definitely get behind these type of piggyback contracts and being able to support that work. There was only one thing that stood out to me because I recall the conversation we had when we were looking at buying devices for the district before, and our CIO indicated, well, they're all the same devices, they just put a different logo on them. And I vividly remember him saying that, and I mentioned Apple being at least a physically appealing product, and he stated, well, they're all the same, they're all made in China. So is there a particular reason you indicated HP in your proposal, since they're all the same?
It was because they were on the state contract. Okay. We were looking to close that. We have a gap. We were trying to get in to get the purchase done before the books close and to spend end of year money.
Right.
It's a couple of groups. So it wasn't going to looking for HP. It was looking for a vehicle that we felt would be acceptable to the.
So in essence, you're going to still say computer devices not to exceed $4 million and still make the purchase based on what was available on the list, though, right?
Yes.
All right. So if that language was, okay, I'll just stop right there, but I think you get my point.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. This is not a long-term plan. Okay. This is a short-term to fill out this gap to get us through the rest of the year. We had already started a process in preparation to do another bid for computers. It just there wasn't enough time to get it done before the procurement books closed for the year, and we would risk some people would risk losing some monies. So that's why we went this route.
Mr. Orgel.
Yeah, I understand what Ms. Jones is saying about it precludes other bidders, but I think these companies go through these, like whether it's government services agency or the state of Tennessee, they go through these processes. And I think I understand we're trying to spend the money before the end of the budget year. And I think we got a further bonus that even we talked about in our procurement meeting today about a program to involve more minority businesses. And I think our facilities department, Ms. Phelan, did a great job on all the contracts for the HVAC. I think 48%, I think was the spend. So I understand what Ms. Jones is saying, but I think we got a bonus here that we have an opportunity to spend $4 million with a minority vendor who happens to be part of a state contract. I think that's good. So the state system is working too, and I guess HP probably went to the state and said, hey, we've got these vendors around the state. And I don't know the company if they're in Memphis or if they have the ability to do it in Chattanooga, Knoxville, all the other school districts, but I think it's a bonus for us. I'm supportive of this.
Okay. Seeing no further lights, moving on to 7.13.
I'm sorry. Is this I don't think we mentioned what the computers were used for. Are they for students, faculty?
Most of them are student devices.
Okay, excellent.
Special ed has a large order. Federal programs has an order. So it's about a total of 7,000 devices.
So while I know you said all these devices are the same, so you're saying there's a chance that my kids may actually get a really nice HP system instead of that bulky thing that they bring home right now? I know they're all the same. They're all made in China, but it's a possibility moving
I only
forward.
purchase nice stuff. So
Yeah, you got bulky too? You got ugly too? Okay, so we like nice. I'm just saying.
Oh.
No?
No, right.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Anyway, I think my commentary is over. That's because you get all the
7.13.
7.13 is cafeteria equipment, some steamers, 11 gas steamers, and 4 electric steamers in the amount of $198,000.
Seeing no lights, 7.14.
7.14 is for automatic heat seal lighting machine, lidding machine, $222,000.
Seeing no lights, 7.15.
7.15 is for some ADA life safety capital work at Sherwood Middle School in the amount of
$4 million.
yeah.
$4,997,530. Seeing no lights, 7.16.
7.16 is for the a roof replacement at Maxine Smith STEAM Academy.
Seeing no lights, 7.17.
7.17 is for a roof replacement at Kingsbury Elementary School, an amount of $198,000.
Mr. Orgel?
I was reading this the other day. Was that the one that there was that the wrong thing was inserted? There was one of these that the wrong school was put in there, and then there was some corrective language. Was that this one?
No.
No, I think that's at the end.
Which
Yes.
one was that one?
It's coming at the end.
Damon Marcus at the end. 719, I think.
That was it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Seeing no other lights, 7.18.
7.18 is for Balmoral Ridgeway roof replacement in the amount of $166,000.
Seeing no lights, 7.19.
Yes, 7.19 is really just a matter we want to bring back to the board for what Mr. Orwell said. We had a typo in the recommendation. I think the recommendation said Shelby Oaks, but it was actually for Kingsbury Elementary. We just want to clean it up for the record.
Yeah. And we reviewed it in the procurement meeting as well.
Okay.
7.19. Seeing no other lights, 7.20.
Similar issue, 7.20 that the board approved a field purchase last year, but the name in the contract was different than in the briefing document, or
Yeah, and the amount. So it should have read Petroleum Traders Corporation and the approximate amount of $2 million, and it had a different vendor and a different amount.
And I just want to raise the board. I appreciate Beth and Mr. Patman for being our internal control, and we know we had some issues around making sure that the documents and what the board votes on is what's actually signed, and really have an abundance of caution, even though these are just kind of name things. We want to bring it back to the board, so it's all buttoned up.
Seeing no lights, 7.21.
7.21 is for some camera upgrades in the amount of $103,000. And I just think for the record, I know that Chief Darling and Jennifer have been working with the board office to schedule a security review. I think we can do some portions of that in executive session.
Yes.
And then also it just dawned on me, I know that I think the governor announced today there's about $30 million extra dollars he's putting in his budget for school security, so we'll be talking about how we can take advantage of that.
Yeah, there's a few updates for that meeting that Ms. Irvin will be providing, and Ms. Goins is sending out a poll to the board tomorrow to get a date scheduled. Mr. Caldwell?
So just a quick question, Superintendent, but I thought it said 30 million, and I thought that 25 of it is non-recurring.
Yeah, that's my understanding of what it was.
So that's not going to split out.
Yeah,
To-
well,
but
maybe it'll
whatever
be,
we can get.
and I'm hoping, Mr. Caldwell, I'm assuming is that it's going to be for security equipment and stuff that they can, but we'll find out more.
All right.
7.22, March budget.
That is a budget amendment. I know Lynn had to get out here to go out of town, so Ms. Carr, can you hit the highlights of the budget amendment?
Yes, thank you, Superintendent. This budget amendment is increasing the general fund by $3.8 million for the Priority School State Grant. The grant was originally included in the federal fund on the December budget amendment, but after conversations with the state, we were told that it should be in the general fund. The amendment is also requesting a reallocation of general fund vacancy savings for Achieve 3000. The special revenue non-federal fund is a reallocation of available salaries and benefits to discretionary line items for the voluntary pre-K grant to ensure all the funds are spent by June 30th. Lastly, the federal budget is decreasing by $3.9 million, and that's primarily due to the movement of the Priority School State Grant. There is also a reduction of $1.2 million for the Preschool Development Grant, with no impact to the number of seats and children served. The decrease is offset by the Memphis Virtual STEM Academy Award and also an additional $646,000 for the iZone School Improvement Grant.
Seeing no light, Superintendent, we're moving on to 8.1. Oh, sorry. 7.23.
Thank you. I think that the board discussed this extensively in the procurement committee. I'm just going to turn it over to Ms. Phelan.
Well, we have a motion to add to the agenda. Would you like me to read it into the record?
Please.
Ms. Amott? Sure. It's recommended that Shelby County Board of Education approves a 2-year contract renewal for pupil transportation services with Durham Student Services. Year 1 annual contract value is $24,200,000, 0 cents. Year 2 is $25,300,000, 0 cents.
Okay. If there are no questions, we're going to move on to, and I think just for the record, we board members had a lengthy discussion about the contract in the procurement meeting, so hence when there is a large item and there's no discussion, it's because they've had lengthy discussion in committee right before this meeting. And if there are any additional questions, we're going to move on to 8.1.
7.24. I think it's an ELT.
Okay, I'm going to refresh. 7.24. This would be the teaching lab.
Ms. Avon, I have the motion if you'd like me to read that into the record.
Please.
It is recommended that Shelby County Board of Education approves the purchase of teaching lab professional development services to ensure effective implementation of the new TN literacy standards, align curriculum, and increase rigor of instruction for K-8 students.
Okay. Seeing no. Is there an amount?
$175,615.
Okay, and that is updated in board docs at this point.
Yes.
Seeing no lights, we're going to move on to 8.1, resolution to approve school board strategic funds allocation. This would be in the amount of $10,500 for E.E. Jeter K-8 for $7,500 and Woodstock Middle for $3,000. Seeing no lights, I think there are no other items before us. This meeting is adjourned. What?
Didn't you have your,
We did the Learn Lab.
was there?
The meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
We did the Learn Lab.
You learned? Oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay, all right. Okay.
Ready to see the record?
But what else, what about this, the strategic?
I did.
You did?
Just did that.
Don't get some of this. This is what you put some of this in.
It is. Great.
I enjoy it as always.
Kevin, it's 7:33. You're welcome. 7:33. 33. 7:33. You said you finished by 7:30.
That's just because he was late getting here. Because we started late.